Hey everyone, are you looking to build your foreclosure list so you can go out to auctions and get properties at a discount? Maybe you've noticed that to get these lists, you have to pay a certain amount for them. And when you go to do it on your own manually, it takes a lot of time. Well, don't worry, because in this episode, I'm actually going to show you how to build your foreclosure list using automation with Selenium and Python. My name is Ariel Herrera with the AnalyticsAriel channel, where we bridge the gap between real estate and technology. I love being able to bring automation to real estate. So if you also like these types of videos, please subscribe to our content so you can see more of it, as well as like this video so I know this is what you want to see. All right, let's get started. In the last video, we discussed how to build a foreclosure list based on the steps from the Bigger Pockets book that recently came out in 2020. Now, the problem here is that the necessary steps in order to get information on auction properties, the details on the lender, the lot size, information on the property itself does take a lot of time. So what we're going to do is actually walk through an example using the Hillsborough County site in Python and how to automate this process. Right now, I'm on Jupyter Lab, which is an interactive notebook in order to work with Python. If you're new to Python, there's a lot of really great tutorials out there to get you started. However, this tutorial will be high level enough where you can just get an understanding of what's capable with Python and Selenium. So the first thing that I'm going to do is install the packages that we need in order to run this code. So I'm going to run the first cell. We're installing BeautifulSoup, which lets us get the content of web pages, Selenium, so that we could actually drive through these web pages, make clicks, enter keys, and then the WebDriver Manager for us to use Chrome alongside of this. So once that downloads, you may have an error that says you need to download Chrome driver. Please do that. There's information on how to do that on the site. However, I am also have in the code that's a little bit easier to install. So the next step we're going to do is run imports. This is basically loading the libraries we just installed. And afterwards, we have our local constants. So essentially what Selenium does, it lets you automate a web page. It's used a lot by those who test web pages. It could be a new application you're using, and your UAT team will usually use Selenium to make sure that the website works accordingly. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a web page with Chrome. So we're setting our Chrome options. Headless means that you could run this stuff in the background, but we're going to actually comment that out so that we can see how this actually runs. The next step is we're going to set our parameters. So I want to work with the Hillsborough County site. So I'm going to enter that URL in here, as you could see. And then I have my login credentials to the website, which I have saved in a separate CSV file, which I upload here. So if I run these two, you can see I was able to successfully upload my login credentials. My username is there. My password I'm not going to show, of course. And then the date that I'm looking to get auction data for is for February 26th of 2021. Great. So now this is the real meat of using Selenium and the power of automation. So what I'm doing in this first line is I'm setting up the driver. I'm using Chrome Driver Manager, and I'm installing it here that we don't have to actually do the whole step of putting it into a path and pointing towards it. It's a little bit easier. And the options are going to be towards the options that I had up here. There's a lot of other options you could use depending on how your website works. There's a lot of, if it's JavaScript heavy, if you're going to be writing in the background, you may need it to be a certain size. But for this case, we only need a couple of options here. So I'm going to set up my driver and get the URL. So when I run this, you're going to see a pop-up, as you see right now, and it brings us to our web page. Great, so now I have these side by side, my code on the left and on the right, the driver for the Hillsborough County site. The first step is to actually log in. So if you're unfamiliar with HTML, that's what basically allows a web page to be created. It's the structure of it. And if we do right-click and inspect, we could see what the element is. Learning HTML isn't hard at all. I have links in the show notes in case you want to get up to speed pretty quickly. So from what we see here is that this is an input field, the ID is log name, and if we look at password, we can see that this is also an input field called log pass, pretty simple. And then the submit button, this is a div called log button for ID. So now going back to the code, you can see that I have here driver, which is the web page, and I'm using find element by ID in order to find that tag that I wanted. I'm just going to click out of this so you could see this run. So it's called log name, the ID, and log pass was the password. And I'm going to find those elements, then send keys. I'm going to send my username and send my password. So now if I do run, you can see this is populated on the right side, my username and password. Next, I'm finding the element that said log button, and I'm clicking it. And now that brings me into the next page for the Hillsborough County foreclosure sales site. Now this is the next step. There's some information that we have to bypass on instructions on payment. And if we right click here, click inspect, sometimes it takes 2 times to actually get to the element itself. So I'm going to click inspect again. And we could see this button it's an input, the type is button, and the value is called OK. So if I X out of here on my code to bypass a notice, instead of doing by ID, now I'm going to look by path. So the path was input, it started with, the type is button, and I can also add that the value is OK. So I'm finding a single element and then I'm clicking it. So shift enter, and then we make it to the next page. But I want to actually go to dive in a layer deeper into the dates of foreclosures. So I'm going to right click on the calendar, hit inspect, and we're going to see here that this is inside a span called the class LNMT. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it's only for the calendar. So instead of using the class name, I'm actually going to look for the contents. And if you see on the left-hand side for the code, I have span contains the text calendar. If I click run this, we now get to the site that I wanted. This has the calendar for auction. However, there's a certain date that I want. I want to see February 26 of 2021. And beforehand, the parameters, I specify this date as my date string, and I actually want to look for that day. So the day itself is going to be 26. If I right click here and right click once more, we can see that this is inside a span called cal number, cal num, and then inside here the text is 26, which is what I want. So what I'm doing here is I'm finding by path. In the span, the class is cal num and contains the text 26. I click this. It then brings me onto all the auctions that are currently in status to move forward on February 26th. The next thing that I want to do is actually get the contents of this information on this web page, and I'm going to use BeautifulSoup to do this. So as you see in the cell here, I'm calling BeautifulSoup and I'm passing in the driver, which is the current web page we're on, and I'm parsing it using HTML parser. Depending on the site that you're using, you may have to go back into the docs and change how you're parsing it. So I'm going to do shift enter and run this, and as you can see, we can now get all the contents that we had before by clicking right click and then inspect, but now it's right here. We actually have all the contents, and if we want to look at it in a nice format, we could actually do prettify here and see it where there's actually indents for each of the elements. Alright, I'm going to X out of that for right now. What we want to do is get these contents. So the first step is I'm going to just right click, inspect, and we could see that this data for foreclosure is in this class, in this table, a class called AD data. There's table here, and it sits in this whole div called auction details. And that's what we really care about, is to kind of just loop through each of these divs in order to get the information. So using BeautifulSoup, what I'm doing here next is I want to get the auction details content. And I'm going to use find all to get all the divs that have this auction details. So if I run this and then I actually view it on the second cell, we could see that we have that exact thing we just looked at, which is auction details. We see as a table, and it's the same web page where we have the auction type, foreclosure, we have case number, and some data with it. Now we want to just take out the actual text from these elements. So as an example, say from this list that we have of all the details, we select the first one, which would be this first box over here. If we wanted to get all the labels, we can run this and we could see all the labels that we have: auction type, case number, final judgment, parcel ID, and so on. If we wanted to look at all the data, remember that class was AD data, DTA, we can run it and we could see that the actual data does map to what we're looking at on the right-hand side. So now for a little bit of Python logic, what I'm doing next is I'm actually going to iterate. So I'm going through my list of each of these content boxes, and I'm basically saying, for one, find what this is, the auction starts. I want to know the time that it starts, and in the case that it's canceled for the county, I'll get that as well. Then the labels, we just went over what those labels are, and the data. So I'm going to be basically extracting that for each of these contents. And what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, if the label, if it equals auction type, then what I want to do is set the auction type to that text field. Now I'm doing that for each of these labels. And then lastly down here is I'm basically putting this into a dictionary. And this will allow me to transform it into a table. So I'm saying auction type will be equal to that auction type name. Now, something that I found pretty interesting is if you see on the right hand side, this one on top has the information such as property address, but the one below does not have that. So how do we handle that? Well, what I'm doing here is at the end, each time we're doing this loop and we're moving on to the next auction property, I'm resetting the values. So in the case that it is not present in my list, it's just going to say, it's going to have nothing. It's going to be an empty string. So I run that, and then what I'm doing lastly is I'm just transforming this into a pandas data frame so we can read it into a table and output it into Excel. So if I run this, we can see now this is all in a nice format in Excel. I'm actually going to bring up the Excel file that downloaded. And we can see we have the auction starts, the auction type, case number, final judgment, parcel ID, property address. The property city part, we can always just parse it out to only get city, state, and zip code separated, assessed value, and plaintiff max bid. So the real value here is that instead of me having to go manually, I just automated this within a couple seconds. Now you can imagine the parameter that I used was date. So what if I just put this into a function where I just inputted the date and then each time retrieved all of the properties there. As well, something in the future is that I could always keep a tab as to ones that I see that are canceled. So ones that previously I scraped, they were there and now have changed to canceled. So I could put this all on my master list. Now one thing that I haven't done yet is actually go into the cases and look at the foreclosure document. So one of the issues here that I've noticed is that if I click this, and this is one of the foreclosure documents, if I want to look up value of claim, for example, I do Control F, I look up value of claim, and I'm hitting enter, but nothing's coming up. The reason is these documents are scanned. They're not actual digital documents that were in an easier format. So what happens now is that I can't actually work with this data. I have to actually go through manually and read the information that I need. However, I would never leave you a solution like that, so please check out our next video where we're actually going to use natural language processing and artificial intelligence in order to parse out this information so we could take the automation to the next step. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed already, please do, and stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks.